Hi. I don't know why my voice just cracked. Let's try that again. Hi, I'm Nia. Welcome back to another writing vlog. Today I'll be working on Project Fortune. If you're new here, hello. Project Fortune is the first book in a fantasy series that I'm working on, and today I'll be discussing the importance of understanding your world building and utilizing your setting. What is world building? World building is the all-encompassing process of creating the fictional universe in which your story is set. Okay, so your story is set in a fictional universe. How do you know if you've created enough? How do you convey that knowledge to your readers? And how do you know when it is too much to tell them? When I started Project Fortune, I had an idea for the plot and an outline. The world the story was set in was very vague and loosely inspired by various sources. Initially, I wanted to fuse aspects of a medieval fantasy setting with technology, but I fell short in figuring out how advanced the tech was. And instead of fleshing those ideas out, I decided to figure out the answers while writing the first draft, which was a big mistake. This led to a bunch of inconsistencies, anachronisms, and plot holes that I had to fix in subsequent drafts. A draft I couldn't even finish because I had written myself into a bunch of continuity mistakes due to incomplete world building. So, how do you go about solving this problem? Let's get into it. First, I compiled the lore I had already established in my manuscript. I kept what worked, cut what didn't, and then I spent some time filling in notebooks worth of notes about the world building. I needed to understand the history of my country and the steps it took to reach the place that it is in when the story starts, as well as the culture, government systems, and the relationship between it, the citizens, and the greater world. I created more in-depth backstories for all of the major characters and clearly defined their belief and value systems, which made it easy for me to understand what they would think about what was going on and how they would respond to the events happening in the story. Next, I made a list of the biggest priority topics that I needed to understand, or else the entire book would fall apart. For me, those were: number one, how advanced is the technology? Who has access? Why? Number two, what modes of travel are available to the characters and why? And number three, what is the spectrum of the curse's ramifications? How are different factions of society impacted and why? Now, you can have things be true in your book that are never explained if it serves your story for it to be that way. However, that can't be true for everything in your book or story, so it's important to know why certain things are the way that they are, even as the author, even if that information is never communicated in the book. If you're having trouble figuring out what problems are in your story, here are a few tips to try as you go through your manuscript. Note instances where a lack of world building creates a problem in the narrative. Those places in your writing that you get stuck on, or you keep rewriting, or that confuse you when you read them back. For example, there's an instance in my book where a group of characters travel a long distance across the country in a car. This is abnormal because the majority of the population can no longer afford to drive. And people who might have had access to old-fashioned carriages had no livestock because food was so scarce that that resource was depleted. So how are people getting anywhere? Well, I spent my early childhood growing up in New Orleans. Last year, or I guess the year before last, I don't know, we went to visit family, and guess what they have there? Streetcars, which sparked this idea where the country built an extensive rail system powered by renewable energy. Problem solved. Keep in mind that you don't have to become a master in city planning or urban development to explain why you have streetcars or indoor plumbing in your world or whatever else, or prove the science behind why blood can be used to track people or genetic testing or whatever. Unless your character happens to have a degree in biology, then maybe they might know that information. Treat it like a magic system. You know, you have hard versus soft. There are aspects of your world that you're defined as hard or as soft. This goes back to what I said earlier, where some things can just be stated as true and you don't have to go into depth as to why. That might be contradictory, but keep with me. Once I understood my world building, it was easier to solve my problems during the revision, and I was able to create a cohesive and more interesting story. I worked out a creation myth. I named the deity and the religious groups and the role of religion in the society, which helped inform how the magic system works and the extent of the character's powers. In subsequent drafts, I was able to better implement the effects of the curse and create the ration system and instill a sense of the level of food insecurity experienced by different groups of people, as well as delve deeper into the ongoing environmental impacts of the curse. In figuring out the transportation and travel aspects of the story, it allowed me to go into more detail about various locations visited by the characters. Everyone is all over the place. Character A is on the run and character B is hunting her, and in order to be consistent with the timeline, I had to know the size of the country and calculate how long it would take them to get to places depending on their mode of transportation and the terrain and a bunch of different details. Anyways, I had to clarify how advanced the technology is and why, and who had access to what and why. I used real civilizations as references to model my country after to determine the progression of the industrial and technological advancements that were made. However, with the application of magic in those advancements, followed by a regression after magic was banned, and then the curse's effects on the environment, I was able to ultimately create this like semi-medieval, semi-dystopian fantasy setting that I was originally going for to begin with. Cool, so you've got all this information about your world. How do you get that into your story? Setting. It can be an underutilized literary device. Your setting is the time and location in which a specific moment of your story is taking place. Stories do not exist in a void. The setting must be incorporated into every scene, and not just through descriptions. Here are a few ways you can incorporate the lore of your story, of your universe, into your story through your setting. Setting is not just where the characters are, but it's what's happening around them. And it's also who else is there. Have your characters interact with their surroundings. This provides a natural segue for them to comment on it, either internally or through dialogue, and what the significance is of that statue over there, or why those people are wearing navy veils, or the history behind the holiday that's happening, or whatever is going on. Have your surroundings interact with your characters as well. A pickpocket bumps into your main character and steals a pouch with a magic jewel, which spurs your ensemble of characters into a manhunt in this unfamiliar city where you're going to do all these things. Or your MC takes refuge in an abandoned barn that turned out to be haunted. I don't know. Let some of your conflicts be setting based, meaning like if they had never been there, then that event never would have happened. Like I said in a previous video, if you can plop the events of your story in any random place and it still would be the exact same way, you're not utilizing your setting to the fullest extent. Understanding the world building clarified so many things for me in terms of visualizing the characters and the setting, which allowed me to elevate the scenes by infusing the story with relevant lore, backstory, and like conflicts and solutions. Note instances where a lack of world building creates a problem in your narrative and solve it. You can do this by thoroughly defining all relevant hard and soft facts about your fictional world. Introduce relevant details about the lore of your world through your setting. Intertwine your plot and conflict with aspects of that lore. Treat your setting almost like it's another character in the story. That was a lot of information, and I hope I clearly communicated what I was trying to say. I don't know. I hope it made sense. Comment below which tips you found most helpful. If you like this series, you can check out my other writing vlogs. I also make bullet journal and reading journal videos. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day, morning, week, night, whatever. Week? Whatever. Goodbye.